Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome back if you've been here before. Welcome if you've never been here before. I just want to get right into it. It's going to be another rambly video. Y'all know the drill. I don't script these things. I just have an idea in my head that has not yet been put into words that I would like to try to put into words. Today was a very frustrating day. The past week or so, I've been setting myself the goal of getting one thing done a day for my classes. Which doesn't sound like much, but when I read philosophy, I need a lot more time to read those sorts of texts, and I have to force myself to read them slowly. If I just give myself one thing to do a day, like if I have to read something, that's my one goal for the day, versus like, okay, I need to read this, and then write this, and plan this. Then as I'm reading it, I'm reading it with the intention of finishing a task, versus understanding and formulating my own thoughts on it, some holes in the argument perhaps. And that has been helpful for reducing the stress and the anxiety I feel when I give myself too many things to do in one short time span. Until, as soon as I am not able to finish one thing in one day, I'm immediately disappointed in myself. And then today, I just was even more stressed, and I went to the library and I worked myself into a frenzy, to the point that I couldn't even think straight. I was so stressed. And about what? Nothing. I have a couple things I want to do. I've even written them down, which removes the stress of remembering the things you have to do. I just couldn't get anything done. And so then I came home, and now I'm here. I wanted to talk about this, one, because it's something that, it's a worldview that is valued and privileged. This idea that a successful day is one in which I complete a number of tasks that I've given myself or that someone else has given me. It's nice to be a contributing member of society, sure. It's good to a certain extent. I mean, at least for me. Days when I do nothing, I feel like shit. I get very restless. I'm a very restless person. If I'm just laying around, watching TV or whatever, that stresses me out. Do I chill out sometimes? Of course, you gotta chill out sometimes. But a prolonged chilling is something that really stresses me out. And it's because I have this deeply ingrained idea that if I don't accomplish a task, if I'm not productive, then that day was basically a failure. I wasted my time, And there's this Alan Watts quote that I've loved for so long. I'm paraphrasing. I'll probably put it up if I find it. But it's basically the purpose of life is so simple and so easy, yet everyone's running around in a fuss trying to figure it out. And I'm running around in a fuss trying to figure it all out. And I want to get into the more philosophical perspectives on this and the harm that can arise from misinterpreting this existentialist idea of authenticity. The problems of distorting the existentialist idea of authenticity with productivity. So this is a deeply ingrained idea that I have, and I know that from a young age I was the independent child, the self-sufficient child. That's a character trait that people look on with respect, It was a compliment when someone told me oh wow, you're so independent, you're so driven, you're so self-motivated, It's not always a good thing. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing, Being told that for so long makes me feel like those times when I'm not able to be self-motivated, when I don't feel driven, when I don't feel independent, makes me feel like a failure, right? Not to mention I'm so deeply ingrained in this sort of existentialist philosophical worldview that, there's no inherent meaning in life. And from that realization, each and every one of us can be our own arbiters of meaning and also, have a shared understanding of things as well. One moment, I think my cat is eating a piece of string. And that's all fine and dandy and everything. And obviously there are many, many wonderful implications of that sort of worldview. For example, the life path that I choose and the life path that someone else chooses, they're equally valid if they don't infringe on other people's ability to capitalize on their own freedom to choose their life path. That's wonderful. And for example, with respecting and appreciating people that have completely different viewpoints as your own, religions as well, understanding you have found faith in a way that's different than I have, and that's wonderful, that's beautiful that can even happen. And I think a lot of quarrels in society today could be resolved if people leaned into that. People said, like, you found faith or you found meaning in a way that's different than I have, but it doesn't infringe on my ability to freely choose meaning or faith or a life path, so on and so forth. That's like the only sort of evaluation system I feel like you should have for how people choose to live their lives. It's like, do you feel meaningful and fulfilled? And is the way you're going about that respect and perhaps even facilitate other people's ability to capitalize on their own freedom? If so, I think that's pretty good. Maybe there are other factors that I'm not considering, but just off the top of my head, that's what I would say. But there's something in that, and I think it's really funny that I chose to use the word capitalize, to capitalize on our freedom, because there is a sense in which this idea of, freely choosing your life path and freely choosing your meaning and blazing a trail for yourself, and there is kind of like this capitalist dimension to it. I'll use my life as a personal anecdote. I have chosen, I have like an abstract goal in life, which is to be always a student and a teacher, ideally simultaneously, and ideally in a way where I can have some sort of job or career that allows me to be both a student and a teacher. And especially to be able to facilitate this sort of moment of reflection and meaning making for other people. And the current concrete manifestation of that abstract goal is aspiring to be a philosophy professor and or an artist. I've chosen two of the most difficult and competitive career options, but that's what we have right now. That sort of existentialist worldview really meshes well with my own struggles, having been the independent and self-sufficient child of the family. Like being the one who is always expected to be self-motivated, self-driven, and determined to succeed in their own independent way. Not necessarily because anyone forced me to, but just the amalgamation of factors that makes someone into the person that they are. It's almost like existentialism, I think, for me, not so much in the recent years, but I just realized today that I need to be careful that it doesn't provide a sort of confirmation bias for my own dependence or independence issues, really. I don't want to use existentialist thought as a sort of confirmation bias for the idea that I have to be self-sufficient, always driven, always motivated, and really productive. Like every day I'm doing something that is getting me one step closer to achieving that goal, Because at the end of the day, it's not really about achieving the goal. It's not about becoming a philosophy professor. It's not about becoming a successful artist. It's about living my life in a way that aligns with my goals and my values. Living my life in a way that allows me to always be a student and a teacher. Living my life in a way that allows me to facilitate a moment of reflection and insight for other people and for myself as well in this constant sort of interplay of student and teacher-ness. I'm very comfortable with the idea of not achieving those concrete manifestations of the abstract goal, and I'm very comfortable with the actual end result of my life looking completely different than I currently imagine it to look, because I have that abstract goal as like the foundation. That used to not be the case. I used to be extremely uncomfortable with the idea that something I'm doing right now does not actively contribute to me achieving this goal of being, for example, a philosophy professor. That's not something I've always been comfortable with, and it took me many years to get over that. And becoming comfortable with the concrete manifestation of the abstract goal changing. It's kind of weird at this point. Again, I just thought of this an hour ago and I was like, I should make a video on that and not script it because I love making the editing process a nightmare for myself. That lately I've been so upset if I don't accomplish a task in a day, which is like some arbitrary thing I've decided for myself. Like if I had a task that was due at the end of the day and I didn't accomplish it and there were some negative repercussions for that, that's a reasonable time to be upset. But these are just arbitrary deadlines that I've given myself. Has reducing the number of tasks that I plan to do a day helped me to read more patiently and actually enjoy the process of reading? Because here's the craziest part is like, if I'm reading impatiently, if I'm reading in order to finish a task, in order to like move on to the next thing, dude, you're studying philosophy and that's the whole philosophy part. You just skipped it. That's the philosophizing right there, is how you're reading it, how you're discussing it with others. Like, if I'm just reading it quickly and be like, okay, done. Oh, I finished the task. Now I can move on to all these tasks. And once I finish all these tasks, I'll become a philosopher. Like, that's not how it works. And I know that's not how it works, which is why I hesitate to describe myself as a philosopher or even as an artist, because it's like, these are things that I'm actively practicing, actively becoming, I guess, but in a way where it's like, I want to be comfortable with being the becoming and not stressing about becoming the being, becoming the thing, you know? But I was thinking, like, when I get in these kinds of moods where I'm like, I have so much, you know, you ever have like so much stuff to do that you can't do anything? When I'm in those moods, the easiest thing to do would be like, okay, I'll just paint something. Is it probable that sometimes me painting is just a way to escape this dreadful feeling of inefficiency that comes from me not completing a task in a day? I mean, sometimes, yeah, there are times when I'm painting as like a form of distraction. If you watch the Unwritten Aesthetic podcast, we talked about this last week. But there are times where the activity of painting for me is distracted coping from the enigma of life. And there are other times where it's a sort of dialogue with this mystery, where it's still a form of coping, but it's a coping directly with that anxiety, with that existential dread, in a way that could produce some fruitful insights. And honestly, I find that the art that I create in those sort of impatient, frenzied modes of being, like a frenzied, distracted state where I'm trying to like fill the time, I usually don't like those paintings. This is a lesson that is like an umbrella lesson that applies to a lot of little things I've learned, but this is like the overarching version of the lesson I'm learning, because I don't think I made a video about this or have talked about this, but when I was in like my artistic rut, I kept starting pieces and not finishing them and being really upset about that, frustrated with myself. I was spending all this time on something that was going nowhere. There was no completed product of the activity that I was doing. When I started painting, I was painting for the activity of painting itself. This is also a Heideggerian idea, but according to Heidegger, let me finish this thought first. But that's how my painting was in the beginning. It was just painting for the sake of painting in and of itself. There was no expectation that anyone else would have to see my art, that I could even have the possibility of selling it. That wasn't even the picture of the for the sake of which yet. I mean, and what a blessing that it is. Not that I'm selling a ton of art, but I'm still so grateful that even if one person would want to buy my art, that to me is like, wow, like I spoke to someone without words. So I love that is in the purview of my purview. I don't even know what that means. I'm getting so sidetracked, but I need to know what this means because I want to use this word. Purview. Wow, I spelled that wrong. Zuständigkeitsbereich. The limit, purpose, or scope of a statute? Oh, a statute. Range of limit. Oh, this is a good word. Oh, I should use this more. Yes, okay. So basically, obviously, I'm extremely grateful and I feel so blessed, and it blows my mind every day that selling my art is something that is now within the purview of my artistic practice. But to get out of my artistic block, it did require me to stop and remind myself, like, art is play. Just play. Just don't worry about finishing a piece. Just start something, try something new, and without the expectation of finishing it, without the expectation of anyone seeing it. Just play. And after a while, that was enough to get me out of it. Eventually, I found an idea that spoke to me enough to dedicate myself to painting that thing and completing that painting. But even the idea of completing a painting is odd to me because, to me, I never really know when a painting is finished. I never get to a point where I'm like, the last brush stroke, and it's finished. You know, like, to me, it's just, my paintings are never finished. I just stop working on them. It's not like a final end point. And that kind of makes me suspect that painting for me is something that is less susceptible to this. It's still susceptible to it, but it's less susceptible to... is it less susceptible to this kind of anxiety about not being productive? No. No, I take that back. Like, painting is definitely susceptible to this anxiety about not being productive enough. It could even be an outlet for that anxiety, because, like, philosophy, when are you done with philosophy? Never. Like, when you're dead. With a painting, it's like, here it is. It's in this nice little square. There it is. I made something. Philosophy is like maybe you make a paper, but in the same way, at least for me, a paper and a painting is like I look at it and there's always something that I'm like, oh, I could have done this, or what if I added this detail? There's always the possibility of an additional step along that path. Like doing philosophy and doing painting in a way that is not oriented towards completion or producing something. Finally, before I completely scramble my brain and lose all of my trains of thought, and there are quite a few in my brain at the moment, so I have to be selective about which one to pick. So the final thing is Martin Heidegger. You love him or you hate him. You read him or you don't. I'm not a Heideggerian, but I do read a lot of Heidegger, and his work, for whatever reason, has continued to provide a springboard for me, a springboard into further philosophical inquiries for almost a decade now, which is crazy. His idea of authenticity, to be authentic, means, as I interpret it, to be a pure potentiality for being. That's how he characterizes our essence, essentially. We are a pure potentiality for being. We are a mode of existing which has an expansive array of possibilities before us. Not infinite, but infinite within constraints, possibilities of life paths, of things, of activities that we can choose to do. But we are mortal. And because of that, there's this guilt that happens because we can't do all of them. As soon as we turn one possibility into an actuality, a whole world of possibilities are now closed off. Like in doing, we forego. In making a possibility actualized, we close off a range of possibilities that were once available to us before we made a decision. But we have to make a decision. We have to do something, you know? But to recognize that that is how we essentially are, is that helpful? Well, it could be. I mean, if you're viewing that as like just the surface level interpretation, which I have talked about and endorsed on lots of different platforms, because I do think it is a helpful place to start, this idea that like, I'm just pure potentiality for being until I actually do something with it. Well, okay, let me do something with it. Oh, I get to pick. That's so cool. I get to pick what I do. My brain's kind of getting scrambled, but I'm going to finish this thought. But if I were just to take that, and like there's a difference between, and this is why I always distinguish between like being a philosopher and like philosophizing or living a philosophical life, because one kind of, I think my brain is tired now. Maybe I've spoken enough. So I think maybe I'll leave it there. And obviously, my mind is not made up about this topic, but I'm very interested to hear what you all think about this topic, because I think this part of existentialism is actually really deeply ingrained in more individualistic cultures. A deeply ingrained idea that to be successful and to live a fulfilling and meaningful life, you have to be productive. You have to make paintings and you have to sell them. That's the idea. That's a real successful artist, is someone who can make a bunch of paintings and sell them, right? Or if you're a philosopher, a successful philosopher is one who has published many books, many articles, who has been cited countless times, and who is one of the leading researchers in their little philosophical niche. It's tough because within the context of society, that is success. And there are structures that kind of put a constraint around what people can imagine a successful and fulfilling life to be. Even though I, for example, have freely chosen my life path of my own accord, and I am very open to it changing. I'm very open to finding fulfillment in life in a completely different way. And in that sense, I do believe that, well, I know that the life that I'm living is authentic. Is it perfectly aligned with my values and beliefs? Yeah, kind of, actually. Yes, the life path I've chosen is aligned with my goals and values. Are there aspects of my life that are not perfect? Of course. Are there things that I am working on in myself to become the best version of myself? Absolutely. But even within my life path that I've chosen, where I'm comfortable with it changing and with the meaning of my life not being directly tied to my career, but at the end, like, that's important. And so it's sort of this tension that one can oscillate back and forth in. My point here is not that I no longer want to accomplish these things, but it's worthwhile to remind oneself to find fulfillment in the activity instead of attaching the idea of success exclusively to external measures of success, for at least two reasons. Whereas finding purpose in the activity will help one avoid burning out, focusing on the end result arguably decreases one's chances of succeeding in these disciplines, because they require innovation and creativity, which cannot be rushed in pursuit of external recognition. And secondly, that such strivings are perhaps reflective of this individualistic idea that I must succeed on my own, when in reality, the most fulfilling lives are the ones that are lived in community and in dialogue with others. Is the alternative to just do nothing? I don't think so. By being like, oh no, it's bad to think of success and authenticity and meaning and fulfillment in a way that's basically synonymous with productivity in like this sort of like capitalist sense. Not even like with monetary value, but just like productivity is just, it's like for the sake of productivity. I don't know. I feel like that's a very capitalist idea. Is this something y'all have thought about before? Is this like a tension that you've noticed before? Like, I feel like this idea is also very intertwined with like Burnout. The Burnout Society by Byung-Chul Han is a great book that kind of gets at this idea. And that was the first book actually that kind of made me confront this weirdness with existentialism and look at this idea of like self-determined meaning and purpose in a more critical light. So if you love existentialism almost to a fault, I would very much recommend his work. And he looks at the problem too from the perspective of like some of these ideas that are ingrained in the individualist societies are actually not super good for us, that trying to find purpose and meaning by yourself is exhausting and also impossible. Like, we are communal beings. We exist with others inherently. From the very beginning, we exist with others. We're never isolated subjects. And so we certainly should not try to create meaning and purpose in an individualistic and subjective, solipsistic? That's a hard word to say. In an isolated way. There are lots of philosophers, like Heidegger even, for example, who felt he had to go deep in the depths of the Black Forest in his little cabin, away from everybody, to make his magnum opus, Being in Time. Or Descartes, who thought he had to withdraw from sensory perception and who thought it would even be possible to isolate his mind from his body and the world around him and find certain truths as a foundation for science by separating himself from everything that is. Anyways, my camera's about to die, but bye! Bye, hope you have a great day, bye!